Hey y'all, I'm Tim. Welcome to the Mr. Maple Show.
Hey guys, I'm Matt. You guys love the Acer Japonicum series, so we're back with Acer Japonicum Part 3.
Like, subscribe, and share. Sign up for our weekly emails. Some of these Acer Japonicum selections are becoming available again through our weekly emails. We list at least 10 new trees every single Tuesday at 10 a.m. Sometimes it's 20. Sign up for that email. That's when a lot of these Acer Japonicums will be coming back in stock.
Let us know if you want to see an Acer Shirasalanum series. I know we're probably already working on one. Our Makawa series has been incredibly popular for that Makawa family, so definitely check those videos out. We wanted to come back here with a Part 3. So guys, we already have a 1 and 2, so you definitely got to check those out after this video. But basically what we're doing is we're breaking it down on these Saturday showcases a little bit by species, and we're talking to you about some different cultivars in each section. So today our focus is Acer Japonicum. They're some of our favorite plants, so it's easy to talk about. It's fun content for us, and we hope you're enjoying this. And if it's something you're liking, we're providing daily content. Definitely subscribe to the Mr. Maple Show here on YouTube.
Now, Acer Japonicums give consistent fall color. I mean, consistent fall color almost every single year. Some of the fall color, after talking to Augustine, maybe because some of them turn fall color based on the day length versus the actual temperature changing to getting colder and colder.
That's interesting because they're definitely one of the most consistent and most elaborate fall color plants in the garden.
Yeah, and they have a little bit thicker leaf, which really makes them hold on to their fall color a little longer than some of the Acer palmatums. I mean, if you're looking for a tree for a great fall color, the Acer Japonicums do a fantastic job of it.
Now, I know we mentioned this almost in every Japonicum video, but one of the things we love about them is it has all those other characteristics you like about Japanese maples, but a little bit more exaggerated. So all of these are actually going to have red tassel flowers in the spring. Japonicums have elongated, larger flowers than most of the other things in Section Palmata. They also have large foliage, so you get this tropical, kind of really interesting appeal to them on that regard. And they're some of our favorite plants. So we're going to break down 5 more Acer Japonicum cultivars for you here today on the Japonicum Showcase. And I hope this is something you like. Let us know if you're interested in even a Part 4, because we can do a Part 4 here on the Japonicums. But I think we're going to start a series on Acer Shirasalanums very soon.
So first up, we've got Acer Japonicum Takinogawa. This is a good medium to large size leaf, but it's probably one of the things that's the Acer Japonicums that is most like what we saw natively growing in Japan.
Yeah, that's something I always like to point out. I love this one. I've got fond memories of going around Nikko National Park and some different areas in Japan where we got some elevation. There was some great Acer Japonicums growing natively there. And Tim and I were just kids in a candy store running around in the woods. We were running around Mount Fuji, and we realized, like, you know, we might be close to a weapons testing facility because we kept hearing explosives going off. So that was a little nerve-wracking, but it was so much fun to be out and just get lost in the native Japanese habitat and interact with some of these things growing natively. I mean, it was so much fun. And Takinogawa definitely reminds me of the ones I like the most that were in the native habitat, which had very rounded, medium-sized leaves and great fall color. Now, this one's it's its own selection. It's actually very different from some of the wild collected ones we've offered, but it has a nice medium-sized rounded leaf. Starts out more yellows to oranges and then finishes more bold red.
And it makes a good mid-sized tree, about that 8 to 10 foot in height. It's in 10 years, it's a great tree to give you a lot of good fall color with a good-sized Japonicum leaf. And that Japonicum leaf really gives a good platform for a lot of the colors to display. I know Matt and I were running around. I remember you taking some photos of this one at Balzer Nursery.
Yeah.
Just in some really good fall color. And it's a plant that everywhere you go and you see Takinogawa in the fall,
it makes an impression.
It makes an impression. I mean, it's one that you're like, man, that is beautiful. And it can be a bold red, a bold purple red, a yellow, an orange, and every stage it grabs your attention.
Right. So next up on the table, we've got another weeping form of Acer Japonicum. So we consider these almost that lace leaf of the Acer Japonicum category. We've got Oregon Fern.
Now, Oregon Fern was a selection by J.D. Vertrees, who wrote the book on Japanese maples.
We could have did a whole showcase on J.D. Vertrees.
Well, we might have to do that at some point. But it's one of his introductions. And it's a little more mounding than Green Cascade. And Green Cascade was introduced by his nursery propagator. So they probably are going through a batch of seedlings, and I'm guessing Vertrees was like, I like this one. And
competing trees.
And Art Wright was like, well, I like this one.
Right.
But they're coming out of the same nursery, essentially.
Yeah, they do share some characteristics, but they are distinctly different there. Very fun plants to be growing. Oregon Fern. Now, a lot of times people refer to, especially the olden days of Japanese maples, Japonicums as fern leaf maples. So you'll see that sometimes still show up in some catalogs and some listings. We don't typically call them that. I mean, I think Full Moon's more interesting, but you'll see some of these older ones sold as fern leaf. And Oregon Fern kind of
Plays on that.
yeah, it kind of plays into that older naming there. Now this one's a low weeping form, very mounding in its shape, kind of slowly works its way up, but it is a true dwarf, so this one works great in containers or in the landscape where you want a smaller plant.
And where Green Cascade will often be wider than tall, Oregon Fern can get a little taller and a little more mounding. Definitely a really cool plant, gives you some good fall colors. Think of a lace leaf Acer Japonicum. I mean, this is a heavily dissected Acer Japonicum.
The shape's going to fit more of what you're in line with your typical lace leaf as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it gives you everything you love about the Acer Japonicums, but with a lace leaf.
Yeah.
It makes a good mid-sized to large weeping green Acer Japonicum that's a lace leaf.
I've had neon orange on this with red accents. I mean, the fall colors are exceptional.
They are.
You know, one of the things I like to point out here, especially when you're talking about the more lace leaf style shapes, it's flowering. So
Yeah.
not only are you going to get that kind of umbrella style shape with this, you're going to get some really prominent red tassel flowers as it matures.
Now, Acer palmatum does flower, but Acer Japonicum's flowers are much larger and more prominent.
They're just better.
Yeah, and as
But if you're looking at it for the flower, they're one of the best maple flowers.
they really are. And that red shows up so well against these green leaves. I mean, it just shows up as a great platform to show off the flower. I mean, you got that green color, that red, cherry red to bright red flower tassels hanging off of it. It really adds something out there in the landscape and garden, which you don't always get with the Acer palmatum selections.
Great plant, whether it's in the landscape or the container. I mean, I think it's a perfect patio planter. You kind of get everything you love, but in a smaller setting, you can bring that back on the patio or the deck. Now with this one, typically, all these are going to work zones 5 through 9. They're actually grafted onto palmatum, but you want to give most of your Japonicums a little late day shade, especially in your heavier zones. You'll have better looking foliage and better fall color, and some of them you'll have bigger foliage.
Yeah, it brings us into the next one, Acer Japonicum Vitafolium, sometimes referred to as the grape leaf maple or grapevine maple. And the reason it is, I don't really like that name, but it has a really large leaf to it. And it's very rounded, almost like a grape leaf, but it's a Japonicum leaf. There's a clear distinction.
Yeah, now people always ask, what's the largest leaf Japonicum? And this one's certainly in the running. There's a few that may be larger. Most of them are from this one's lineage. So Vitafolium is normally the starting point for the largest leaf styles of Japonicums. Now, giving them late day shade can enhance that dinner plate size foliage. So, I mean, it's not uncommon with late day shade to get, pretty good size foliage going on there. And this one's kind of the granddaddy of all the big leaf forms.
Yeah, and the leaf on Vitafolium is larger than the leaf on Takinogawa.
Yeah.
I mean, it is
larger.
much larger. And it is one of the larger dinner plate size leaves, but it has a more rounded leaf, almost like Takinogawa. I mean, it has a little incision, but not nearly as much as some of the others.
As you get into some of the largest leaf forms, a little bit of it is conditional for sure. So if you had, a Woods number 2 in the same conditions, they might have slightly bigger foliage, but maybe if you had it in more sun, that might be the determining factor on which one had the bigger foliage.
Yeah, that definitely plays a role in the Japonicum leaves. But Acer Japonicum Vitafolium gives you some really nice oranges, some pumpkin oranges to bold reds in the fall. And it's an amazing plant. It's got a Latin name on it.
Right.
I wonder what the original name was on it before it got the Latin name in Japan. But an amazing plant with that really, really large leaf.
So this one also has a very flat leaf, which I think is one of the reasons why it looks so big. Like the leaf's very flat.
That's true.
And it's not curling most of the time. It's more flattened out. And it really just gives it a huge kind of tropical appearance to it.
Love what Vitafolium does, though. I mean, my first Vitafolium experiences, the ones that I think about are the ones that were at Billy Schwartz's Green Mansion Nurseries.
Yeah.
And he had this huge, ginormous Vitafolium. And, I mean, I just remember going and looking at that thing and just seeing these large leaves.
Right.
And it's amazing the cool plants that have came down that lineage. I think Aurora Borealis, which is another
maybe
one,
in a part 4.
maybe in a part 4.
I was already thinking about that.
Came from a seedling from Vitafolium.
So next up, we've got another uniquely colored one. This is Acer Japonicum Aka Mote.
Now, this is sometimes sold as Acer Shirasanum Ruby. Some people,
but also there's a ruby mixed up in there too. So
there's an Acer Japonicum Ruby as well, which is a completely different.
You want to buy this one under the correct name, which is Acer Japonicum Aka Mote. I think it's gotten mixed up in the trade. Some people will sell the Japonicum form as Shirasanum, but then some people have a completely new Shirasawa they'll sell as ruby as well, which doesn't make any sense.
And there's an Acer Japonicum form. I remember getting one from Brian Upchurch.
Yeah.
That is almost a Emmett's Pumpkin-like plant.
Right,
Call
right.
it Acer Japonicum Ruby on top of that.
So this one is the correct form. I do think ruby's gotten mixed up with it a good bit. Acer Japonicum Aka Mote is kind of the precursor to Blush and Beauty. You get some really fun oranges and red blushing hues over top of a Japonicum. Now, if you give this one late day shade and early morning sun, you can accentuate this trait and really get some fun flushes in that early spring that give you some really unique color.
It really gives a bold spring interest for an Acer Japonicum. It makes a good mid-size upright, 8 to 10 feet in 15 years. But it's a slow growing.
Right.
But it has some of the most bold spring colors of any of the Acer Japonicums.
This and probably the Blush and Beauty are the closest thing to a red Japonicum.
Yeah.
I mean, they're definitely the closest thing to a true red Japonicum. I love Aka Mote. I think it's very unique. I've been increasing production on it here at our nursery because I'm so enamored with it every year. I think it's one that we could probably do a lot more of than we're even offering currently because I like it so much. I'm a huge fan of it. Aka typically meaning dark red in Japanese normally refers to more of a dark red type color there.
And I would compare the foliage size to something like Takinogawa.
Yeah.
Or slightly a little bit smaller.
Yeah,
But it's
very rounded
close.
for sure.
Very,
almost maybe even a little more rounded than Takinogawa.
and I think that's why a lot of people categorize Acer Japonicum Aka Mote as a Shirasawa. Because some of the Shirasawa have that little more rounded leaf like Acer Shirasawa are.
Now, that's one time where I'm actually glad that the dendrologist actually separated out because originally a lot of the Shirasawa and the Acer Japonicums were all just full moon maples.
And as early as like 1980.
Yeah, and we considered all these in one category. And then they started to kind of define Acer Japonicum and separate that out. Now, we still refer to both those as full moon maples because of that really cool rounded lobes they have, that rounded foliage. But I'm glad we separated those out because you can see those defined traits a little bit more in Acer Japonicum. You can see why it's its own species. And I just think it's got a lot to offer.
I mean, they have different shapes. A lot of Acer Shirasawa grow completely different shapes as the Acer Japonicums. And they're similar. I see how they got them mixed up, but they're two clearly different species.
Yeah, the right form of this one's distinctly Japonicum. You get a very different growth rate on a Japonicum also. Japonicums do tend to form wide V's, so some people are always afraid of the V shapes on Japanese maples. Maples are one of the hardest woods you can grow, so they're a very durable plant. You don't have to worry about V's in maples as much as you would some other trees. So I think that's what scares people. But Acer Japonicums want to form this 2-2-2-2-2 thing. I mean, that's what they do.
Yeah. So next, we've got an Acer Japonicum Yamakagi.
Okay, so Yamakagi may be my favorite fall color Japanese maple of them all. And that's saying a lot, but it definitely stands out to me. It's definitely in my top of my favorites when it comes to that fall season. I planted a massive one of these in front of the office for that very reason. So if you know I'm getting the biggest one possible, it's one of my favorites. It is consistently one of the most crazy, interesting fall color maples I know of.
Yeah, I love this plant for what it brings. I remember when we went to our very first Maple Society meeting, and we had already begun to fall in love with Acer Japonicums through Meiku Jaku, Green Cascade, and a lot of other plants. And we saw Yamakagi at Jim Schmidt's house of Don Schmidt Nursery.
Yeah, we were very fortunate to get to meet Jim Schmidt before he passed, and he was very kind with his time to tour us around his home, and some amazing plants. But I remember specifically Yamakagi stole the show for the fall color for me. It made such an impression in peak fall color.
I remember going up and just putting my hand next to the Japonicum leaf and seeing that large leaf next to my hand. It was bigger than my hand.
That was like 09. We still have that as one of our main picks now.
And I've still got big hands. I've got big hands. And the fact that it was bigger in my hand, it was just in fall color. I mean, I fell in love with Japonicums by seeing Yamakagi just out there in the landscape in fall color. And Yamakagi does some amazing things. I mean, it can really have purple borders around it as it's becoming fall color from the outside going inward with yellows, oranges, reds. The color palette on this is amazing in the fall.
Right.
But this is one of the largest leaf Acer Japonicum selections.
Yeah, it can get some huge foliage. It's been very durable for me. I have one in a lot of sun, but it's been very durable for me here in zone 6B in sun. Again, typically in your heavier heat index areas, late day shade is preferred for most Acer Japonicums. I remember on that trip, Tim started doing a little bit of translating. We just started to learn what names mean in Japan, Japanese, and we were starting to clean up some of our terrible Southern accent pronunciations on some of these. I think that trip we were probably walking up and asking for Benny O takes.
We were.
Like that. So Yamakagi, I remember Tim was looking at that and then trying to understand it. And we pulled into Jim Schmidt's house there, and it said Mountain Shadows.
The subdivision.
Subdivision, yeah. And Yamakagi essentially means mountain shadows. So makes a lot of sense where the name came from there being a Jim Schmidt introduction.
Now, the story behind this plant is it was one of his neighbor's Acer Japonicums in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And he just loved the plant because of these large Acer Japonicum leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And the crazy thing is how fortuitous and how crazy is it and that he had his house,
right,
and his neighbor had an Acer Japonicum seedling.
That was worth introducing.
Yeah, it was worth introducing.
Yeah.
So,
great plant, though. Yeah. And I'm so glad he got it grafted and got out there in the trade. We continue to up our numbers on this one. So if you're seeing any of these Acer Japonicums and they're not available now, well, we don't ever have them all available at once because we have around 1,400 different varieties of Japanese maples here at our nursery. If we had them all available at once, they would outgrow their sizes before we could sell them all. So we can't have everything at once, but you can sign up to get notified as soon as something's back in stock. Any of these Acer Japonicums, we love them. They're coming back in stock.
Yeah. So make sure you sign up to get notified. Sign up for our weekly emails on MrMaple.com. If you like this video, share this video with your gardening friends. Click the like button and comment in the comment section. That helps more people see our videos.
Guys, I hope you love these Saturday showcases. Let us know what you would like to see on upcoming showcases. We may do an Acer Japonicum Part 4. I've already thought of some good ideas. Have to get into some of the weeds there with some of the crazier ones we know about. But yeah, we definitely might do that. And be looking for an Acer Shirasalum showcase coming soon. Let us know in the comment section other species you would like for us to showcase. We also showcase other nursery collections, so introductions by Red Maple Nurseries and people like that. We like to focus somewhat on the historic ones that have had, massive collections. We did one on Dell Lauk's nursery, which was a classic nursery that named so many different plants. We started breaking it down by country a little bit too. We did a whole video on just interesting plants that we grow here from Australia.
Yeah, no, that we're going to try to keep bringing you more fun, interesting content through these Saturday showcases. So make sure you're checking it out every single week. Get involved in the live chat because there's such a great community there. We really appreciate you watching this video. Take care,
God bless,
and have an awesome day.